Attack on Titan, without a doubt, one of the best manga ever made. But did you know the studio hid a massive dark secret from you? Because of TV rules, the animated version is heavily censored. They completely hid Isayama's most psychotic and bloody manga panels. The list is so huge, this video is divided into 2 parts. This first part covers everything up to the end of Season 3 Part 1. If you want me to drop Part 2, covering Season 3 Part 2, all the way to the end of Season 4, smash the like button and comment Part 2 below. Let's start! Number 1. The famous tragedy where our story begins. Carla being torn away by the Titan. But did you ever notice how the studio censored this death? In the anime, the moment of death was completely hidden. We only saw aesthetic blood drops floating in the air. However, pure brutality was waiting for us in the second chapter of the manga. Isayama showed no mercy to the reader when drawing this. First, he throws the terrifying close-up of Carla violently vomiting blood right in our faces. Then things get even more out of hand. Between the massive teeth, with her body folded, we see that dark panel where her legs are ruthlessly chewed. This was the nightmare-filled truth that TV regulations ripped away from us. Number 2. You all remember that devastating moment of despair during the Trost invasion. While watching the anime, most of us thought Franz had just passed out or had internal bleeding, because that sneaky camera angle was masterfully hiding a massive trauma from us. But when you look at Chapter 5 of the manga, you realize just how sick the truth actually is. The thing they were trying to bring back to life in that scene was actually half a corpse. Yes, Franz from the waist down was literally gone. Everything below his stomach had already been torn off by a Titan. Since the studio couldn't show this horror on TV, they buried everything solely behind those screams. Number 3. It's impossible to forget the slaughter of Levi's squad in the forest during the female Titan arc. The anime handled this scene incredibly fast and in a dark atmosphere. The studio managed to hide that fatal wound from us very well by using shadows. But look again at that split-second attack where Günther was slashed in midair. Because in Chapter 28 of the manga, no shadow can protect you from this brutality. That blow, which was just glossed over as a black smudge in the anime, hits us right in the face in all its nakedness as that massive, deep cut shattering Günther's back and nape in the manga. This detail, which was too bloody for TV screens, is one of the sharpest examples of censorship. Number 4. The thing that made Reiner and Bertolt's betrayal legendary was Mikasa attacking them without a single ounce of hesitation. However, this scene was so fast and chaotic in the anime that we only saw a superficial blood splatter. The studio masterfully hid the true devastating impact of the blow from us. If you don't believe me, look at that speed again. Until we open Chapter 42 of the manga. In the manga, Mikasa's blade literally splits Reiner's forearm in half. The cut is so brutal and deep that it reaches almost to his elbow. A human's arm being split in half down to the bones was obviously too heavy for TV standards. That's why that massive wound was covered up in the anime with just a little blood effect. Number 5. We all watched that first bloody fight between Eren and Reiner, holding our breath. In the anime, the Armored Titan's punch looked devastating enough, yes, but the studio had once again hidden the true destruction of this blow from us. Look closely at the second he takes the hit. His face just warps a little, that's it. Now let's go to Chapter 44 of the manga. In the manga, that ruthless punch from Reiner literally obliterates the right side of Eren's head. His jaw, his teeth, and half of his face are completely vaporized. It's much more sinister, isn't it? The animation team put in a lot of overtime to adapt this grotesque panel for television. Number 6. That brave but tragic end of Hannes, who threw himself forward to avenge Eren's mother. In the anime, the moment of death was very fast, and we only saw a black silhouette being torn apart. The camera angle and shadows swallowed the horror of that dramatic moment. However, Chapter 50 of the manga breaks our hearts in a much more disgusting way. The moment the Titan bites Hannes, the manga panel gives us an uncensored close-up, and clearly shows how his entrails are spilling out. While the TV version just focused on a sad death, the manga made us watch how a monster tasted its meal. Number 7. That famous scene where Hange and Levi interrogate Sonus in that dark dungeon In the anime, we heard the man's agonizing screams. Yes, the torture was intensely physical. But by keeping the camera at shoulder level, the studio masterfully hid the true visual brutality behind those screams from us. Because in chapter 55 of the manga, what was hidden behind those shoulders was a total sadomasochistic show. Hanji doesn't just pull the nails, she carefully arranges them on a bloody plate and mocks the man by shoving it in his face. As if that wasn't enough, she pulls his teeth out live with pliers, and Levi ruthlessly punches his face. Television viewers were completely protected from these psychopathic details lying behind those screams. Number 8. That cold moment when merchant Demo Reeves paid the price for betraying the military police at the hands of Tenny. The anime mesmerized us by portraying this assassination with a dark and stylish atmosphere. But did you note how the camera quickly panned up the exact second Kenny pulled the blade, just to avoid showing that bloody sight? Because chapter 56 of the manga doesn't show us the sky, it shows us how that blade tears through the skin. In the manga, the camera has nowhere to run. We watch the moment the blade cuts the flesh, the despair, and the spurting blood in all its brutality, completely uncensored. The studio resorted to the oldest trick in television history to hide this blood-curdling death, panning the frame away. Number 9. I found that scene where Hanji suddenly bursts into the room while Erwin is calmly getting dressed. Actually, at first glance, it's a pretty ordinary moment. Erwin is getting ready for a new day, buttoning his shirt. Nobody was looking for censorship here anyway. In the anime, we saw him directly in this clean state, with his buttons fastened. But the real question is, why did the studio specifically choose to start this scene from the dressed moment? Because when you open chapter 56 of the manga, you see the body censorship lying behind this ordinary scene. TV regulations simply couldn't allow a freshly severed arm to be shown alongside a bare chest. In the manga, we are faced with a completely shirtless commander and the harsh reality of that amputated arm. To avoid showing a man's bare chest and that amputated arm on screen at the same time, the studio hastily dressed him up and masterfully hid this dark nudity from us. Number 10. Remember that tense moment when Levi was staking out on the roof and Kenny the Ripper made his shocking entrance? When Kenny fired his gun, the anime covered Nifa's face with a massive cloud of blood and smoke. At that moment, it was impossible to make out exactly what happened to her face. Moreover, when she collapsed to the ground, the studio had her head tilted backward, completely preventing the camera from seeing the wound. Because when you open chapter 57 of the manga, you see the horror behind that smoke. In the manga, that bullet doesn't just pierce through Nifa's head, it literally blows the very center of her face to pieces. This corpse, with its face completely vaporized, was too grotesque for TV screens. The studio had to hide this blood-curdling truth behind smoke and a clever camera angle. Number 11. You remember that scene where Levi hides in the barn with his squad after that deadly chase with Kenny and his team? In the anime, Levi was fully dressed as usual, sitting calmly and talking. Even though he had just come out of that terrifying life-or-death battle, there wasn't a single scratch visible on him. Well, did you ever wonder what happened to Levi's wounds after all those explosions and bullets? The answer is hidden in chapter 59 of the manga, but the studio chose to throw this scene completely in the trash. In the manga, we see this great first aid panel where Levi is sitting completely shirtless while Sasha stitches his wound. There was no blood or a severed limb to censor. It was just Levi getting his wound stitched. However, instead of including this perfect detail in their animation, the studio completely erased it and deprived the viewers of this legendary frame. Number 12. You know that famous flashback scene where Eren remembers the terrifying moment he ate his father? In the anime, this scene was so fast that most of us only noticed the severed hand and shattered glasses lying on the ground. Actually, if you look closely, Grisha's corpse was also lying in the background. However, the studio masterfully made us miss that bloody sight with massive light rays and a dark blur. Because in chapter 62 of the manga, you don't have the luxury of such camouflage. You see the truth in its clearest form. In the manga, Grisha's half-eaten body, torn from the waist up by Eren, stands there in all its brutality. While the reality of a child eating his own father is psychologically very heavy anyway, the studio used speed and censorship lights as a shield to make these disgusting remains suitable for television. Number 13. You remember that epic moment told by Rod Reese, where Grisha invades the underground cavern and eats the founding titan, Frida. When Grisha sank his teeth into Frida's neck in the anime, a massive censorship curtain kicked in. The studio completely covered that bloody bite with a blinding white steam and a beam of light. We are all used to seeing blood in titan fights, but what exactly was the studio trying to hide here? Because when you open chapter 63 of the manga, you see the pure violence behind that white light. There is no steam censorship in the manga. Grisha's titan doesn't just bite Frida's neck, it literally rips her spine right out of its place. This overly graphic drawing with the spine dangling between the teeth was deemed too bloody for TV regulations and imprisoned behind those shining lights. Number 14. That sick moment when Dallas Zachary presents his torture machine, which he calls his masterpiece, to the captured noble. In the anime, it was quite difficult to understand exactly what the machine did. The camera angles tried very hard to protect us. The studio hid the mechanism from us by using Zachary's back and narrow frames. We only saw the upside-down face of the victim and a few tubes. But what exactly was this machine doing to the man? Because when we look at chapter 63 of the manga, Isayama has no mercy on our eyes. In the manga, the entire machine is completely uncensored. The victim is completely naked, and that tube is directly connected to the man's rear. Zachary displays this sadomasochistic fantasy where he forces the man to eat his own feces in all its disgusting glory. This psychopathic detail, which was impossible to broadcast on television, was inevitably imprisoned behind Zachary's broad shoulders in the anime. And here we are at the end of part 1. Even this censorship list up to the first half of season 3 was enough to blow our minds. But believe me, the censorships in the Marley Wars and Rumbling Massacres in part 2 are far more psychopathic. If you want part 2 to drop right away, don't forget to like the video and type part 2 in the comments. See you later!